Past midnight when the hum began. Not loud, not obvious, but in the dry stillness of Burkina Faso's southeast border, it was unmistakable. The high-pitched whisper of something mechanical slicing through the dark. And then, just seconds later, hell fell from the sky. A single unmanned drone, flying low and silent, locked onto a convoy of vehicles creeping across the bushland. No headlights, no transponders, no insignias. Inside those vehicles, armed men, mercenaries, loaded with Western gear, heavy rifles, encrypted radios, and combat-grade night vision. Their destination, a strategic oil refinery under construction just 50 kilometers from the border. Their objective, sabotage, chaos, and if possible, kill Burkina Faso engineers and steal intel. They never made it. In one devastating flash, the lead vehicle was vaporized. The second flipped into flames. The rest scattered, but it was too late. The drone made a second pass, then a third. By the time ground forces arrived, the sand was blackened and smoking. Every mercenary neutralized. Burkina Faso had struck first, and the world noticed. At first, there was confusion. Who authorized it? What drone did they use? Where did they get the coordinates? And then, the facts emerged. Traoré had ordered the strike himself. The drone, a foreign prototype, North Korean design, Russian modifications, AES encrypted targeting system, and the intel, intercepted communications and satellite triangulation from Mali and Niger. It wasn't just a counterattack. It was a demonstration, a message to mercenaries, a message to their sponsors, and most importantly, a message to every African nation still pretending the fight for sovereignty wasn't already here. Burkina Faso wasn't waiting to be attacked anymore. It was hunting first. And for the first time in decades, Western analysts admitted, this we did not expect. The bodies were burned, the vehicles twisted wreckage. But what investigators found at the strike site shocked everyone, especially Traoré's high command. These weren't ragtag fighters. These were professionals. Their weapons were clean, their tactics tight, and their equipment foreign, expensive, precise. In the wreckage, US-manufactured assault rifles with biometric grips, French satellite radios still logged into encrypted networks, tactical maps printed in English, and marked with Burkina Faso resource sites. Fingerprints pulled from surviving gear led to a bombshell discovery. Most of the fighters were Nigerian nationals, former special forces, some even recently discharged from elite units. But they weren't acting under any official Nigerian orders. They carried no state insignia, no passports, no dog tags. They were ghosts, hired shadows, and someone had paid them handsomely. Banking trails traced through satellite data pointed to offshore accounts registered in the Caribbean, funneled through shell corporations based in Abu Dhabi, London, and Paris. The deeper Burkina Faso intelligence dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't a rogue operation. It was coordinated, funded, greenlit. But who pulled the strings? That answer was darker. Intercepted voice memos from satellite phones revealed a key codename repeated over and over: Falcon Hand. It was familiar to Traoré's top intel officers, a phrase flagged in prior CIA-linked sabotage attempts across the Sahel, a call sign used when deniability was essential, when blood had to be spilled without fingerprints. Even more alarming, one of the dead mercenaries had a phone still intact. In it, a contact saved under a simple label, DC Handler. The implications were massive. This wasn't just a team of hired killers. This was a proxy war unit designed to destabilize Burkina Faso's rise before it could inspire a continent. Traoré called an emergency meeting of the AES Council, and in that meeting, he said 5 words that would shape the days ahead. If they send ghosts, we send thunder. The order to strike didn't come easily. Captain Ibrahim Traoré is a soldier, but not a reckless one. He doesn't launch drones on rumors, but this time, the intelligence was crystal clear and chilling. 2 nights before the drone strike, Burkina Faso's Signals Intelligence Unit intercepted an encrypted call bouncing off 3 towers, one in Nigeria, one in Ghana, and one in Ouagadougou itself. That meant one thing. A mole was operating inside the capital. The call was brief, coded, but it ended with the phrase that set off every alarm. Operation Broken Spine begins in 72 hours. Within minutes, military cyber teams decrypted the associated data packet. Attached was a crude satellite image, a zoomed-in shot of the oil refinery under construction in Ouagadougou, the pride of Traoré's new economic independence campaign. Below it, coordinates. Above it, a timestamp. The mercenaries weren't coming. They were already inside the perimeter. Burkina Faso special forces were mobilized silently. Niger's drone command, already monitoring the area, confirmed unusual movement near the southeastern corridor. Vehicles traveling without lights, stopping at obscure checkpoints, off-road routes bypassing standard border crossings. One image showed a man in full tactical gear, face uncovered, holding a map. He had a Nigerian military tattoo on his forearm, and a patch once worn by Western-trained peacekeeping forces. That was enough. At 3:44 a.m., Traoré called his war council. 5 officers, no civilians, one decision. He looked each of them in the eye and asked one question. If they reach the refinery, what happens? The response was solemn. We lose the project, we lose momentum, and we lose the people's trust. Traoré nodded once, then calmly issued the words that would define the night. Deploy the drone, terminate the threat. It wasn't a show of power, it wasn't revenge, it was preemptive survival. Because in the new age of warfare, you don't wait for the bullets to fly, you strike before your future burns. And with that, the sky opened. It wasn't American, it wasn't French, and it definitely wasn't bought through any Western supplier. The drone that struck the mercenary convoy in southeast Burkina Faso was something the world didn't see coming. It was a hybrid machine, North Korean design, Russian modified targeting, AES programmed software interface, its name inside military channels, Nairi 7, a nod to an ancient mossy warrior queen. Compact, radar stealth-coated and equipped with infrared thermal precision, the Nairi 7 could fly 800 kilometers without refuel, but this model had been upgraded for one purpose only: to end incursions before they start. Developed in secret under Burkina Faso's new Sovereign Defense Tech initiative, the Nairi 7 was built with direct cooperation from engineers in Pyongyang and tested discreetly in northern Mali with help from AES partners. Its firepower, 2 compact heat-seeking missiles and a custom-designed fragmentation payload that could obliterate armored vehicles without damaging nearby terrain, perfect for protecting infrastructure while eliminating hostiles. But it wasn't just the hardware that shocked Western analysts. It was how fast it was deployed. In under 12 minutes from command order to launch, target recognition using AI fed with live border data, 0 civilian casualties, 0 second chances. When satellite footage confirmed the strike's aftermath, analysts at AFRICOM reportedly said, "Whatever they used, we don't have anything that moves that clean out there." And suddenly, everything changed. Burkina Faso, a country once considered technologically inferior, had just demonstrated a sovereign strike capacity backed by non-Western tech alliances. It didn't just level the battlefield, it redrew the map. No more dependence on French drones, no more begging the US for surveillance imagery. Burkina Faso had its own eye in the sky, and it had just blinked, lethally. The message was loud and clear: if you walk into this land with weapons, you won't walk out. The strike was public, the explosion undeniable. Yet from Abuja, the capital of Nigeria, nothing. No condemnation, no press briefing, no request for clarification, just silence. Inside the Nigerian State House, however, it was chaos. President Bola Tinubu's national security team was blindsided. Sources leaked that intelligence chiefs were scrambling to identify the dead men, but couldn't, because most of them had vanished from military records months ago. No official orders, no government acknowledgement. But biometric scans confirmed what was feared. These were former Nigerian elite soldiers, now operating as off-the-books mercenaries. Worse yet, preliminary internal reports suggested that several of them had recently trained in a foreign-run facility in Senegal, one known to host private security contractors with Western funding connections. So why didn't Nigeria speak up? Because the truth was far too dangerous. If Abuja admitted these men were theirs, they'd risk triggering a diplomatic firestorm with Burkina Faso and its AES allies. If they denied knowledge, they'd still have to explain why Nigerian-trained men were on a covert sabotage mission inside another sovereign nation. Caught between exposure and humiliation, the Tinubu administration chose silence, hoping the world would move on. But the world didn't. African media exploded. Nigerian and Malian outlets asked the question openly: was Nigeria trying to destabilize Traoré under foreign pressure? Burkina Faso TV ran 24/7 coverage of the drone strike aftermath. Interviews with locals, analysis of intercepted mercenary gear, and repeated footage of Traoré's now viral quote, "Those who send killers into our home will receive no invitation, only fire." On the streets of Lagos and Abuja, Nigerians were split. Some denounced the mercenaries and called for a full investigation. Others warned that Western influence is turning our soldiers into pawns. But the most haunting rumor came from within Nigeria's own military. A leaked voice note from an officer whispered, "They knew. They just didn't think Traoré would respond." He did. And now, the silence from Abuja speaks louder than any official statement ever could. As the dust settled over the drone strike zone, another story began to surface, one far more dangerous than a border skirmish. Because inside the remains of the mercenary convoy, investigators discovered something chilling. A tactical operations binder, water-damaged, charred, but legible enough to raise alarms. Inside, satellite images annotated in French, tactical formations drawn to NATO specifications, GPS-marked oil and gold infrastructure points in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, and stamped across the top, Foreign Asset Liaison, Priority Objective. Traoré's intelligence unit immediately flagged the symbols. They matched identifiers from previous French military planning templates, last seen during the height of Operation Barkhane. But the real bombshell, the binder's communication protocol logs, each message packet routed through a server cluster in Virginia, Langley, Virginia, the heart of CIA operations. Traoré called an emergency session of the AES Security Council. Inside the war room, generals reviewed every intercepted message, every signal burst, every time-stamped relay. The conclusion: this wasn't just Nigeria, this was a coordinated proxy operation. And the backers weren't wearing uniforms. They were sitting in Washington and Paris, signing off on plans designed to make Burkina Faso implode from within. Why? Because Traoré had done the unthinkable. Nationalized oil, expelled French troops, refused IMF debt, and declared Africa no longer open for exploitation. To Western powers, that wasn't sovereignty. That was rebellion. And the only way to stop rebellion is to create chaos. The CIA, long accused of stirring coups across Africa, remained silent. France's foreign ministry denied everything, but couldn't explain why a French-manufactured SAT radio system was found on a dead mercenary at the site. AES leaders were done talking. In Niamey, Bamako, and Conakry, defense chiefs began coordinating a new protocol, AES Zero Compromise, a zero-tolerance strategy against any foreign-backed sabotage network. And as for Traoré, he stood before the cameras once again and said, "If you send agents in the shadows, don't be surprised when we send light to burn the dark." The drone strike was explosive, the evidence of foreign sabotage, chilling. But what happened next? That wasn't orchestrated by governments or generals. It came from the streets, from Lagos to Bamako, from Dakar to Johannesburg. Africa stood up. In Ouagadougou, thousands gathered outside the National Assembly, waving Burkinabe and AES flags. They weren't just protesting, they were celebrating. Traoré struck first. "Finally," shouted one man with tears in his eyes. Young women painted war paint across their cheeks, chanting, "Burkina is awake. Who's next?" In Mali, students printed leaflets with satellite images of the drone strike aftermath. At the top, in bold letters, "Don't mess with sovereignty." In Nigeria, the origin of the mercenaries, the reaction was different, but no less powerful. Some were angry. They felt betrayed by the silent complicity of their leaders, but most were just heartbroken that their own brothers had been used as pawns by foreign interests. One viral tweet from a Nigerian activist read, "They didn't die for Nigeria. They died for someone else's oil money." Across Africa, social media exploded with solidarity. Trending hashtags, Traoré the Defender, Africa is waking up, or sovereignty or death, and memes, thousands of them. Traoré holding a joystick captioned, "Press X to eliminate invaders." A map of Africa with drone targets marked "No fly for colonizers." Clips of the explosion edited with Afrobeat and anti-colonial slogans. Artists began painting murals of the strike. Poets recited verses in marketplaces. "We have buried fear, now we bury trespassers." And then came the student marches. In Ghana, in Kenya, in the DRC. One placard read, "Traoré did in one night what 50 years of diplomacy could not." For the first time in decades, it wasn't a Western leader dominating headlines in Africa. It was a Burkinabe soldier, young, fearless, and unapologetically African. This wasn't just geopolitical, it was generational, because for every corrupt official in a palace, there were a million young Africans in the street, ready to fight for what's theirs. And with one drone strike, Traoré had lit the fire. The pressure came fast. In Washington, White House officials released a carefully worded statement. "We urge restraint and call for an immediate de-escalation of hostilities in the Sahel." In Paris, the French foreign minister declared, Burkina Faso's actions threaten regional stability and violate international norms. The EU convened an emergency session. NATO intelligence networks buzzed. BBC and CNN rolled out back-to-back specials. Is Traoré leading Africa into chaos? But in Ouagadougou, there was no panic, only laughter. Captain Ibrahim Traoré, sitting with his top advisors in a secure command bunker beneath the presidential complex, reviewed the Western responses in silence. Then he leaned back and said, "They talk of order, but what they fear is control slipping from their hands." He wasn't wrong. The West had played the same card for decades. Label defiant African leaders as dangerous, paint them as unstable, call for restraint, while funding the very chaos they claim to oppose. But this time, the old playbook wasn't working. Burkina Faso didn't flinch. AES didn't condemn the strike. And the people, they cheered louder. Traoré took it a step further. He held a press conference, live, no teleprompters, no scripted lines, just fire. To those urging restraint, we see through your mask. You armed the mercenaries, you trained the saboteurs, you triggered this. And now that we've responded, you call us dangerous. He paused. Let the silence burn. Burkina Faso is not your puppet. Our borders are not open to conquest. If protecting our land makes you uncomfortable, good. That means it's working. The clip went viral. Even Western citizens, tired of endless hypocrisy, began reposting his words with captions like, "This is what real leadership looks like." Think tanks warned of a new Cold War in Africa. Defense analysts called for immediate countermeasures. But deep down, the West understood the truth. This wasn't about a drone strike. It was about losing control and the fear that others might follow. Traoré had crossed a line, not the West's line, Africa's line, the line that separates obedience from freedom. The drone strike may have killed the mercenaries, but the war had just begun. Intelligence reports warned of more incursions being planned. Encrypted chatter from foreign servers hinted at secondary assets waiting in the shadows. Traoré didn't wait for a second wave. He called an emergency session of the Alliance of Sahel States, AES, Mali, Niger, Burkina Faso, the trio that had already defied ECOWAS, expelled France, and redefined African unity. What followed was unprecedented. The immediate activation of a joint military response protocol, Operation Iron Shield. Not a drill, not a simulation, a full, real-time, cross-border defensive doctrine. Within hours, AES satellites were redirected to monitor high-risk zones. Encrypted channels were opened between Ouagadougou, Niamey, and Bamako for 24/7 battlefield coordination. Joint air patrols began rotating. Burkinabe drones, Malian helicopters, and Nigerian recon jets scanning every inch of the Sahel for threats. At ground level, it was even bolder. Mali deployed elite counter-infiltration units to the Burkina border. Niger sent mobile radar stations and long-range anti-air systems. Burkina Faso reinforced every strategic oil, gold, and lithium site with AES commandos. Command centers were established in each capital, each linked by real-time intel, satellite feeds, and shared drone swarms. If one nation was hit, all three would respond in under 5 minutes. This wasn't just defense, it was deterrence. A declaration to every foreign actor planning sabotage. If you strike one of us, you face all of us. And this time, we shoot back. Even more shocking? Guinea, Chad, and the Central African Republic sent military observers to AES headquarters, expressing interest in joining future versions of the Shield. The West scrambled. Pentagon officials called it a dangerous militarization. French analysts called it a rogue alliance. But on the ground, African citizens called it something else. The first real African army. Traoré, Goïta, and Chiani appeared in a joint broadcast. No medals, no suits, just uniforms, grit, and a single unified message. Africa is no longer defenseless. We are the shield, and we are ready. They thought it was a warning shot. They were wrong. The drone strike, the viral speech, the rise of Operation Iron Shield. None of it was an accident. It was the beginning of a doctrine. A new African rule. Step onto our land with weapons, and you won't step off it. In the days that followed, satellite traffic intensified. US surveillance drones hovered at a distance. French intelligence teams shifted their attention deeper into AES territory, but they didn't dare move, because something had changed. The cost of intervention had gone up, way up. AES intelligence leaked one final memo, not to provoke war, but to end the guessing. A single sentence stamped in red across a classified communique. All unregistered military presence inside AES borders will be treated as hostile and neutralized without negotiation. No ambiguity, no bluff, just fire. Western think tanks scrambled to respond. Rand Corporation called it a seismic shift in Africa's defense posture. The CIA flagged Traoré as a Tier 1 destabilizer. France quietly evacuated several private security consultants from Ouagadougou and Niamey. They understood. The red line had been drawn, not in ink, but in blood and steel, and crossing it now would mean open confrontation, not with a single state, but with a hardened alliance born from betrayal, war, and resistance. Meanwhile, African youth were electrified. Graffiti on city walls read, "Don't tread, don't test, don't try." Students at the University of Bamako held seminars titled "The Day Africa Fought Back," and across AES territory, school children were taught a new acronym, IS, Iron Shield. It's not just protection, it's identity. As for Traoré, he stood atop a newly secured oil platform in Koudougou, surrounded by engineers and soldiers. When asked by a reporter if he feared retaliation, he replied, "Fear is for those who borrow power. We built ours." Then he turned away, eyes fixed on the horizon. Because for the first time in a century, Africa wasn't waiting for orders. It was drawing the line and daring the world to cross it.